everyone. Hope you're all doing well this evening, morning, wherever you are, depending on where you're joining us from. We're so excited to welcome all of you and kick a new round of our MENAWCA online discussions. This is Mahfouz, an assistant professor at the American University of Kuwait. And on behalf of the MENAWCA Executive Board, I would like to welcome you to our Spring 2022 round of online discussions. We're very excited to have with us today the WLN editorial team in our first discussion for this spring. And the title of our discussion will be Building Visibility as a Writing Center Professional and as a Writing Center Field, Trends and Observations from WLN blog and WLN journal editors. Our dear WLN team, we're super excited to welcome you. Without further ado, do you mind introducing yourselves to us?
Sure. Thank you so much for having us. Thank you to the MENAWCA board for this invitation. We're very happy to be here. My name is Habib. I'm the lead editor of the Connecting Writing Centers Across Borders, a blog of WLN, a journal of writing center scholarship. I can introduce everybody or turn it over to each person. What's preferable? Should I go ahead and do the introductions? Okay, Karen is nodding. Okay, I am joined today by my co-editors on the blog, Connecting Writing Centers Across Borders, Esther, Namubiru, and Weijia. And it's also an honor to be joined by Mickey Harris, Foundational Writing Center Scholar and founding member of WLN, the journal, and CWCAB, the blog, and by Karen Johnson, one of the editorial team members of WLN, the journal. We're really excited to be here, and thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Esther. Esther's sharing the slides. Before I turn it over to my colleagues, I just wanted to provide a brief explanation of our goals for the session. So on the surface, we're sharing with you the constellation of research trends in the WLN publication landscape. So that includes the journal and the blog. By doing so, though, we're hoping to inspire our colleagues, all of you, to submit articles to the WLN journal and to the blog so that we can expand our field's knowledge of what's happening in the Middle East, North African region, which we hope in turn expands writing center scholarship overall. In the March-April 2021 issue of WLN, the Journal of Writing Center Scholarship, Elizabeth Kleinfeld, Sohyu Lee, and Julie Preble published a very important piece titled Whose Voices Are Heard? A demographic comparison of authors published in WLN 2005 to 2017 and writers interested in publishing. In that piece, they found that an overwhelming majority of the authors who were published, as well as the authors who indicated interest in publishing, were white. International and minority authors' voices are lacking in the journal, but also in the field at large. As the authors of the piece suggest, the lack of diversity in our field is affecting both professional membership and writing center scholarship. So we invite you today, alongside the authors of the piece, to help us move beyond individual actions to broader structural change that is needed for institutionalized diversity to become a reality. And we believe, as the editorial team here, that one way to do this is through publishing research and scholarship by our colleagues outside of the US and North American context. So first, we're gonna begin with a very brief history and vision of the WLN journal and blog that Mickey will introduce us to. And then we'll move into the trends observed, the publication trends in the journal, which Karen Johnson will go over, and then in the blog, which Weijia Lee and Esther will go over. During the presentation, we invite you to be thinking about the questions that Esther is about to put on the screen We really want to save about 20 minutes at the end for conversation. And we're hoping that these questions can sort of guide that conversation. So which themes that we present today resonate for you in your local context? What additional themes from your own local and lived experiences and writing center work do you think should be explored in our publications? And what additional questions do you have for us about the content of our presentation or about any publication opportunities with the journal or the blog? So I'm gonna stop talking and I'll turn it over to Mickey to give us a brief history of the WLN journal and blog.
Okay, thanks, Anna. I'll try to be quick, and moreover, I can talk very rapidly. I am older than probably all of you put together, so I'm going to have to take you back mentally to what the 1970s were like. There was no internet, no web, nothing, no way to communicate except to go to conferences or to talk by phone. And there were a small coterie of us, people in the United States, who were tasked with starting writing centers, but none of us had any history of what a writing center is. We all came to this with degrees in literature, linguistics, education. And we had met at a conference, the National Conference in America is a 4 C's, Conference on College Communication and something, but they're 4 C's. And we were all trying to share the little that we knew, say we've got to keep together. We've got to share what we know. We've got to help each other. And as the session was ending and the next group was coming in, I passed around a piece of paper and I said, write your names down and your addresses, and I'll try to figure out a way we can keep in touch and find out who each other is. And that was the start of what I called the Writing Lab newsletter, because I didn't know what else to call it. I was just starting a writing lab. I was at Purdue, where labs are where students come in and break things and start things and do things. And centers were centers for research. So we were the writing lab. And I put together this little 3 or 4 pages. The real intent was simply to know each other. And so you'll see lists of names. But in that, on the second paragraph of that first issue, which are just things, pieces of paper that I cut and pasted together, which our kids love because I did it at the kitchen table and they sat around sniffing the glue. What I was asking for is asking people to send their contributions and questions, announcements, news, evaluations of materials, suggestions for format, content, anything that people could think of to share the little bits that we were learning. So it was all about communication and connecting and sharing. And that was the goal. And the very last line of that second paragraph is, our intention is to keep the newsletter brief, useful, and informal. And 40 some years later, I hope that that's still the goal. We keep it short, because I did at a conference an audience analysis saying, do you want long articles? And people said, no, I don't have time. So we limited the articles to 3,000 words. And several times I kept asking, do you want longer articles? And as other journals finally started up, they said, no, I want something I could read in a sitting. And it has turned out that when people send things too long, they can condense down to 3,000 words and you can read it. So that's really our goal. And so we now still call it WLN, but as the newsletter evolved, we realized it's not a newsletter, it's a journal. So we still wanted to keep WLN as a memory to those early days. And so it's WLN, a Journal of Writing Center Scholarship. What we're trying to do is to connect with each other. And so far it had mostly been the United States. And we tried connecting through social media as that became available. We have a Facebook page, a Twitter page, a Twitter feed. And then at some point, we began to think, what's going on in the rest of the world? Why aren't we connecting to them? And why are we only getting articles from the United States? And one person who was very technologically savvy at that time, which meant he knew how to figure out what the web was all about, said, why don't we have a blog? And we said, oh, a blog, that will reach people. And the blog says exactly what we want to do, connecting writing centers across borders. And our 3 editors, as you can see, have done an incredible job of reaching out, bringing the world together to connect, to collaborate, to help each other. I think we still have the same mission, and you're doing a phenomenal job. I'm just I'm complimenting the blog editors. Okay, why don't we take it off to Karen?
Okay, so on the next slide, you'll see that I'm going to use a sample issue from last year on the WLN website, because this issue provides an excellent representation of some of the trends that we're seeing in the journal. As we go to the next slide, you'll see that this is an article about qualitative research, and this was done from a writing center outside of the US at Hiroshima University. And in this particular article, they delve into research about their praxis. And the research revealed the powerful importance of dialogue at the beginning of a session to help tutors understand the writer's goals, which often differs from what writers originally indicate when they make an appointment. We know that all of you are doing your own research like these authors. And so we want you to think about what research you're doing that you would like to share with other Writing Lab newsletter readers. Though we've received articles like this outside the US, we'd like to see more. As we look at this next article, there's something I'd like to point out that Jessica Weber really focuses on in this particular article. Has a quantitative study in comparison to the last one, which was a qualitative study. So we're not looking for one type of research. I want to make that very clear. But in her research, she wanted to find out how collaborative authors were in submitting and publishing their work. And she also wanted to compare WLN's results to the number of collaborative works in the Writing Center Journal. And what she found is that multiple authored articles have become more common in both publications, which she attributes, and I agree, to the friendships that have developed at conferences and online forums such as this. So what I want you to gain from this is that she points out that the growing number of collaborative manuscripts that are being written in WLN are growing. So if you are thinking about writing an article, I want you to really consider, who would I like to write with? Who would be a good partner with me? Because what you'll find is that writing with a colleague can energize you and help you maintain your enthusiasm. As we move into the next slide, we'll see that we have a book review that was written by Craig Medbecki, and he is critiquing a book on graduate writing centers. And this book is a compilation of theoretical foundations that ground writing center practices and pedagogy and how to expand graduate writing support. One of the things that I want you to gain from this is that we are seeing more articles talking about graduate writing center support, because graduate writing is different than undergraduate. So if you're helping to support graduate writers, we'd really love to hear how you're doing that. And that would be a wonderful contribution to the journal. And then finally, as we move into the last example, it's our tutors column. And our tutors column is, this particular one is on tutor education. And tutor education is one of the favorite topics that authors like to submit. In this particular one, Galen Hall discusses tutor education and the unique insights he gained while tutoring. I'm sure your tutors are gaining some unique insights as well. And tutor columns are also a wonderful opportunity for writing center directors to work with their tutors on writing articles such as these. Also, these articles are great for writing center trainings. I know that I use these when I am training my tutors. And so not only could you help your tutor write an article such as this, but also using these articles are great for tutor education. Finally, let's talk a little bit more. What other things are scholars talking about? Well, as we all know, with the rapid shift to online education, we've had to learn how to do our work differently. So we are seeking articles that discuss alternative forms of tutoring. Authors are also discussing other changes outside of tutoring that they're making as a response to our experiences in the pandemic. For example, online training and workshops are some of those ways that we're making changes. And then finally, we are seeing more articles on social justice, and we continue to invite articles that discuss those topics. In our next slide, we'll see that, well, what else? What big questions do you want to explore? What research do you have that you've been working on? And what new ideas or praxis or any area of writing center theory, pedagogy, and administration are you thinking about? Those are topics that we love to publish about. That I really want you to know that we welcome diverse voices. We don't just want the white director here submitting. We want newcomers. We want, as well as experienced scholars. We want professional staff, and tutors, administrators, because all those different groups have different insights. And from those different insights, we can learn more about our work, and it can energize us with new ideas. On the next slide, you'll see that these are the basic guidelines for our articles. This is on the WLN website, and we don't need to, I don't need to go over these, but what I want to point out is before you go to write an article, it's important that you read through these guidelines first, because it'll help you know what the parameters are for writing your article, so that you'll know that ahead of time. And as we move into our next slide, you'll wonder, well, okay, what do you do to get a special issue or DEC started? And the main, it's not too hard, it's talk to one of us. When Ted and I had an idea for a special issue, we just talked to Mickey, and she's so engaging, and she gives such wonderful ideas, and she really did guide us in the development of our special issue on tutor education. So that's really
It looks like Karen just froze, unfortunately. I think she was just coming to a close right there. So maybe we'll turn it over to Weijia.
Okay, so in the next couple slides, I'll be talking about how you all can contribute to the blog. So here are the submission guidelines. So considering time, I won't be going over everything in detail, but instead I'll be providing some comments. So first we have feature piece, which is our longest submission. And here are the questions that we like to ask for authors to think about what type of topics or things they would like to write about. And we are more than happy to work with authors to develop their ideas and providing feedback along the way. So that's really what we are aiming for. And next we have Global Spotlight, which is shorter than the feature piece. And again, we ask these big questions that can help authors frame their submission with an angle. That is to say, instead of something descriptive about this is what we do, this is how Writing Center work looks like in our context, we also would like to see something unique and some ideas that can contribute to the Writing Center field, including theory and practice. And of course, with Global Spotlight, another goal of ours is to add more to the map. Every time we publish a Global Spotlight piece, we add it to our map as a way to kind of record and document Writing Center or Writing Center-like divisions or offices around the world. And as you can see from the slide, we definitely can use more contribution from the MENA region. And next, we have, to echo the tutors column on WLN Journal, we also have something specifically for tutors. So for this submission, we also have some big questions that tutors can think about when they draft their piece. But at the same time, we also welcome creativity. As seen from the pieces that we've published, sometimes those pieces are not strictly in the format, and it could be personal, it could be more broader. But yes, we really encourage tutors to submit, and feel free to share this information to tutors as well. And next we have our brand new question and answer feature titled Dear CWCAB, which is guest authored by Dr. Stasia Moravsky-Rigney, who actually proposed to us the idea that we can make the blog a place to host list of answers and resources relevant for Writing Center related questions. And here you can see this is our very first installment, which we published in early this month on tutor training. So feel free to go to the post, read, and maybe comment down below with your question. And last but not the least, we have the Slow Agency podcast that we editors started in spring 2021. And our goal with this podcast is to really have conversations with scholars pertaining writing studies or Writing Center studies. And Karen here was one of our very first guests to start off our season 1. And Mickey here shared with us the history of WLN and her thoughts on internationalizing the Writing Center in season 3. And the podcast is available on our YouTube channel, which is WLN, and Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. Right now, we are in preparation to release season 3 in the upcoming weeks, so stay tuned. Now, let me just turn over things to Esther.
So I'm going to share with you some of the trends we have observed on the blog. We wanted to share these trends to help you consider if you're seeing trends such as these in your experience, in your location. And if you are, you could send pieces over to the blog or to the journal in order to increase the visibility of your region. We have 4 trends we've observed, which are the value of diversity and multilingualism in the center, the adaptation of the North American Writing Center model to non-Western contexts, changes in the Writing Center and technology in the post-COVID-19 center. I'll go through each one pretty quickly, stating some of the questions that we've noticed being discussed on the blog. So the first trend that we're observing is the value of diversity and multilingualism in the center. One of the questions that we have been noticing folks talking about is this one. In multilingual and multicultural communities, what is the Writing Center's role in ensuring that students who are non-native speakers of the dominant language are heard? There have been other questions raised, but that's been one of the main ones. And some of the Writing Center professionals in Latin America have certainly reached out. We just spoke with Violeta Molina Natera about writing centers in Latin America, and this is what she had to say in regards to this trend. She said in Chile, they have indigenous communities, and there are some students who don't have Spanish as a first language. So tutoring is in both languages or in Spanish. And the tutor knows the cosmovision of this culture, and they respect that of their indigenous community. You can hear more about what she thinks on this question if you head over to the podcast. The other folks we've talked to have included Asao Inoue, who says that there's a way to allow writing centers to be the center of politics of English and its judgment, or of language and its judgment. So we're interested in what you all think about this question, or maybe you could present a different question in relation to this trend. The other trend we're noticing, as I mentioned, is adapting the North American Writing Center model to non-Western contexts. Again, many questions have been raised about it, one of them being what unique factors impact the adaptation process of the North American Writing Center model in non-Western contexts. We spoke recently with Tom Deans, who posted a series on our blog, kind of sharing with us his experience in helping to start a writing center at a university in Uganda. And he wrote in one of his pieces on the blog that my Ugandan colleagues are inclined to give the North American model a try, yet they will also plan to depart from the familiar model. The most salient departure is one of scope. The center will be designed to serve not only undergraduate and graduate students, but also faculty and staff. So for that Ugandan context, he's seeing the professionals there kind of adapting the model and even moving away from it in order to meet the real opportunities in their community. We want to hear from you as well if you have noticed something similar. The third trend has to do with changes in the center. One of the questions that we've had people talking about on the blog is how might writing centers prove their relevance as things like AI and machine learning advancements increasingly learn and address the writer's needs. We had a conversation on the podcast that's not yet on the blog, you'll hear about it soon, with Joe Essid and Brian McTagg, who have recently released a book, an edited copy, Writing Centers at the Center of Change. And they spoke to this issue as well as to other changes that are being observed in the Writing Center. So this could be a trend that if you wanted to talk about in your context, you could as well. And the final trend is technology in the post-COVID-19 writing center. Questions there have been, how might the sudden en masse integration of online technologies affect peer tutoring pedagogies and principles? What does it mean for training writing center consultants? And here we have actually a lot of people that have commented on this trend. One of them, Lisa Bell, wrote a piece on the blog, Rethinking What to Preserve as Writing Centers Move Online. And she says that writing centers must aim beyond replicating in-person tutoring sessions and be responsive to learners and opportunities for learning online. So she has been thinking about, some of the cautious things to consider. Other writing center directors have chimed in as well. We had a piece published a few months back by the writing center director, Anita Mchoyan from Hagezian University Writing Center. And she was talking about the tutor training aspect of it. She said, moving with the demands of our new reality, if we're unable to go back to full campus presence, we plan to continue training peer tutors by developing new methods of access via online platforms. So I want to be able to hear from you as well about some of the trends here or others that you're observing. If you head over to the blog, you will see this tab called COVID-19, where you can read more about what people are reflecting on regarding that particular trend. Here are the trends again. I've gone over them pretty quickly. From the blog side, we've got 4. The value of diversity and multilingualism in the center, technology in the post-COVID-19 center, change in the writing center, adaptation of the North American Writing Center model to non-Western contexts. And to remind us, all the trends on the journal are collaborative writing, graduate writing centers, changes made due to the pandemic, alternative forms of tutoring, and social justice. I'll open it up now to Anna to take us through a discussion about these.
Thank you so much, Esther. Actually, I'll turn it over to Karen because I think she had one more thing she wanted to share before we open it up for discussion.
Yes, thank you. And I'm so sorry that I got kicked out. I'm not sure what happened there, but and this is probably the best time to introduce this thought. But one thing I want to say is that writing for publication can be a little bit scary. And so there are things to think about when you are considering writing for publication. One I encourage you to go to our resources page because there are webinars on all kinds of topics about getting started and working through the publication process, and just tips and tricks for doing publication from start to finish. So I really encourage you to go there and just listen and watch those webinars because they really are well done. The second thing I want to emphasize, and I'm sure the blog editors are also in agreement with this, is that we mentor you through this process. And there have been several times that for me, as I've worked with writers who have submitted manuscripts and they've gotten feedback, that we've Zoomed, we've talked on the phone, and it's through that talking process that we are able to work a writer when they get to that difficult spot in revision and are not quite sure where to go. And so I just want to end this conversation by saying that we are a supportive group of editors, and we do like to help our writers who have good ideas that are worth publishing make it through the end with their writing, and to know that sometimes it does take several revisions to get to that point, but we do want to support you as you go through that writing process.
Thank you, Karen. So, and thanks everybody. I think we'll open it up now. I'm pretty amazed that we got through this in 35 minutes. So that means we have a good 20 or 25 minutes to open it up for discussion. I did see there are a few questions and ideas coming through the chat, but we would love to hear from you about anything that resonated with you in terms of the trends that we're seeing in our publications, or any ideas that you have or are noticing are absent from our publications. And also, of course, we'll take any questions about the publication opportunities with the blog or the journal. So let's see, I can't see, the only people I can see on my screen, Sahad, are us. So I can't, oh, now I can see everybody. Okay, thank you. So does anybody have any questions they'd like to unmute and ask, or any ideas or comments you'd like to share?
Chat, Amy shared something.
Amy Hodges. Hi, Amy.
Hi, what did I share? I
Nice
shared a
to
lot of.
see you.
Hi, y'all. I'm sorry. I hope that the sound's okay. I'm in a coffee shop, so that's why I've been using the chat function a lot. So I guess one of my questions is, I think, or maybe a context that's helpful for the MENA region, is about working conditions that a lot of people are in. Like in the US, people like me are in tenure track positions where we're encouraged and supported to publish research. And that is not always the case for institutions in the MENA region, that people are teaching a lot of classes and directing a writing center and doing all of these other things. So I wonder, not that you can fix the working conditions of people in the MENA region, but like this mentorship piece seems like a really important part to help people who may not have a lot of time to devote to research. So I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit.
Karen, do you want to take that question about mentorship with the journal?
Sure. So it can happen in various ways. One, if you have an idea for an article, you can reach out to Mickey or one of the co-editors, and we can talk about your idea and where you would want to go with that. So it can begin with a conversation. Would this be an idea that the journal would consider publishing? So you can start off that way. The other way is to write a piece and get feedback on it. So you can do that by submitting the manuscript. Generally, and Mickey, correct me if I'm wrong, it'll come through the email and then we'll look at it. If it seems like it would be a good fit for WLN, but it's not quite ready for publication, the editors will talk about it and give you feedback and to revise, to resubmit. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then for me, and I know that other editors, when they have been working with a writer, when through that revision process, when we send it out to reviewers and then they send the feedback, sometimes a author will kind of be stuck and not quite sure where to go with that, or they're interpreting the reviewer's feedback. Will sometimes get on Zoom or the phone and talk about ideas for revision. So that's the kind of support that we're talking about. Does that answer your question?
Nikki, did you want to say something? I think I saw you.
I just wanted to add, initially you send things through the website. There's a submission page. But before that, if you just simply want to talk about, is this a viable idea to think about? Sometimes, and it doesn't have to necessarily be what we call research. Are you involved in a program that you might want to share with other people? A way to approach students, a new idea about tutor training, something that has worked. The hardest thing for us as editors, if people come up with good ideas and they say, oh, I want to publish, but it hasn't been tested yet. It hasn't been tried out. We don't know the reality of it. We don't know exactly how it fits the reality of the situation, how you have to change things. So we ask that if people come up with suggestions and things to do, that they try it out. And then their article becomes, here's what I tried, here's how I had to modify, here's what worked, here's what didn't work. But sometimes, and you know from tutoring, that it's so good when the student comes in and they just sit and talk and the idea gels. We encourage that kind of thing, but we encourage that through email. Don't go writing up something before you really have a good idea. It's just so good to talk to us. But when you want to submit something, that goes through the website. But I'm saying reflect on what you do. People get scared by the idea of the word research. Oh my God, I have to have all these numbers and charts. And sometimes some of the best things we can do, and that's what I wanted to emphasize initially, is that there's so much good work going on, so many good things that are happening. Share with other people. We haven't got time to think about everything that we're doing because we're all so busy. Amy, what you described is just classic everywhere. That's life. But we could help each other. And I think that's what we're trying to say, to communicate, to collaborate, and to share. I think your first question might be, what do I want to write about? And that's a great question. Does that help at all?
Yes,
Thanks,
absolutely.
Nikki.
Thank you.
I think I see Inez, your hand is up.
Yeah, I have a question about languages. Do you accept papers that include examples from another language, let's say Arabic language? Because in the region we're all the time dealing with Arabic is the mother tongue of our students. So sometimes we want to publish research, but it has examples in Arabic. So would you accept a paper or to publish a piece that has examples in Arabic?
Thank you for that question. I'm so glad you asked it because I think Esther, Weijia, and I forgot to mention this, but we do, on the blog, we actually are very open and encouraging of publications that include other languages. In fact, we have in the past, we haven't had any recently, but in the past we had a few pieces, full pieces written in, I think, Mandarin and then translated into English. So we're open to having examples, as you say, Inez, within the piece itself in, let's say, Arabic, but we're also open to having the piece written in Arabic if there is the possibility of somebody helping to do the translation. That's something we would love to see and enhance on our blog, is the multiple languages. Thank you for asking that. I'm not sure about the journal, but I'll turn it over to Karen and Nikki.
I honestly don't know. We would have to ask the company that publishes it. It would depend on whether they're capable of that. I don't know.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Does anybody have any other comments or questions about the trends or the publication possibilities?
I wonder if you would publish papers that talk about not just the writing centers, but the interaction between the writing center and the teaching of writing, because as Amy mentioned, in the region, most of us are not just working with the writing center, but we're teaching writing to undergraduate students, and we have contractual obligations that we need to fulfill, and so on and so forth. So would you encourage having papers that also discuss the teaching of writing and refer, of course, to the role of the writing center, but it's written from the point of view of a teacher or an instructor working with students?
I think you'll find that for the blog, we are very open and flexible. Yes, we do consider those pieces. In fact, because a big part of our goal on the blog and Mickey's initial vision was to understand the writing culture and teaching of writing in other contexts, because that does inform how writing centers operate and also informs writing center scholarship. So we are very open to that on the blog for one of our feature pieces. That would be something to certainly consider for that category.
I think that would be more appropriate for the blog, because all of our readers are people in writing centers. And here in the United States, there are so many journals for the teaching of writing that they turn to those journals for such articles. So I guess we would separate it only as it affects the writing center and written from a writing center perspective.
We recently had a conversation with two people out of Hong Kong, the University of Hong Kong, Jos Lai and Alan Ho, who talked about how they took this idea of the writing center, but then really evolved it to be able to collaborate with people who teach writing in their university. They took the writing center model as well as the writing across the curriculum model, which is really more in line with, what happens in the classroom. And then they talked to us about how they developed their own kind of writing center approach that would be able to work in the faculty into the center and work in some of the theories that come from the classroom and talk about them in relation to tutoring. It was such a great conversation and just a very different way of thinking about what we do in the center and how it relates to what faculty do in the classroom. So we would be open to something that you would want to discuss in that kind of vein as well.
Okay. In the chat, there is a question about what would be an example of an article on social justice?
Esther, do you want to answer that question about the blog? I feel like I'm talking a lot.
An example of a question to ask about social justice. Was that the question?
Yeah.
Well, some of the thoughts that we've been thinking about on the blog is how are we making room for other voices that writing centers serve, but maybe there isn't as much conversation about what kinds of needs these people have. I think though, I'm glad Amy is here because I just read a piece that she wrote regarding how some of the terminology we use in our discourse here in America about social justice and multilingual learners might not account for truly multicultural spaces such as the MENA region. So we might say things like, how might the center support speakers of English as a second language or things like that? Whereas, when you're working in a region where terms like first language, second language don't quite fit, it becomes a whole other question now. So I thought that was really interesting. In the same piece, she mentioned this issue of digital access and how, especially within writing centers that are located in countries where we don't have as much of a presence in terms of publication, because they are publishing, but they're publishing to journals that are in English. And sometimes accessing those very journals where they've sent their articles is very difficult for them. That's a social justice issue, an equity issue when it comes to the publishing world. and writing centers in those regions. So that would be something to talk about on the blog as well. And Amy, I'm going to stop here and let you chime in because this is what you were talking about in that article.
Well, first off, Esther, you summarized it brilliantly. I don't think I have anything else really to add. Just that, first, Gail, in the chat, I would love to hear what people in this region think about that term, social justice, because I do think it means something different in the context, and what your context is in allows you to do, and what counts as like resistance to inequities in a particular context. So I think essentially we need to hear more about what that means for different contexts. I would love to read pieces like that.
I just want to echo that and say how much I would love to read pieces like that too. I think that the blog would be, the editorial team on the blog would be thrilled to get pieces that are really exploring what social justice means in different contexts. It's such a huge conversation here right now in the US, given the Black Lives Matter movement, but what does that mean? What does social justice in the writing center and in writing classrooms mean in other contexts? We would love to see that.
Yeah, and also I was just, I was thinking also along the lines of what Amy was saying, because I work in Dubai, and I don't ever think of really having much time to even read blogs having to do with I run the writing center, but I also teach four courses and we have a part-time writing center, and then I'm also trying to do my own creative writing. So I was just very curious how social justice would come up. I have students that are very interested in Black Lives Matter, but of course we live in a region where you can't just go protest, so there's ways in which the writing center creates, and our writing classrooms have a safer space to express things that actually are not allowed to be expressed in public spaces. So yeah, anybody that has anything to add to that would be great.
I'll just say that I have been thinking a lot about the idea of writing centers in times of crisis, kind of, and in other contexts. We interviewed Violeta Molina Natero about her work in, is she in Colombia? Yeah, in Colombia. And she was talking about, the resistance movements in Colombia and how students were getting involved in that, like demonstrating and being involved in that, and how that kind of seeped into the writing center space. And then we had another piece by Todd Hunter at AUB in Beirut, who was talking about the crisis in Lebanon and how they're doing writing resilience workshops in the writing center. And so what you just spoke to, Gail, is another angle on that, where you might be in contexts where that kind of resistance is not allowed. And so how does the writing center become a space for that kind of processing? I think there's a lot of opportunities for writing centers in times of crisis. What is our role? What are we doing? How do we support our students in that? How does it kind of spill into that space?
I would say, kind of piggybacking on that, so connects to this idea of remaining relevant in the public, in the conversations that our students and our colleagues and others are having in our universities, etc. So if these are some of the issues they're wondering about, and we can create a place for those issues to come in the center and be discussed in the center, and the center becomes almost like a town square, a marketplace for these ideas to be shared safely, then that also helps our centers to remain relevant. Joe Essid and Brad McTagg argue that we're always competing for resources, and also making our universities to see that there's a lot of work happening in the center and very little time to do anything else, and very minimal resources resources, but we want to be able to show them that what we do matters. And so this could be something that we talk about in order for them to see the other things that we want them to see, especially in that resource front.
Yeah. I think I just want to add on the concept of social justice, because for me, Writing Center is really a space where, as a consultant myself, I am able to see all kinds of opinions and ideas. And whenever I see something that is different from what I think, or that is kind of against the greater good, if I can put it in this way, then I might use my ability to kind of question and to help the writers reflect, on whatever thoughts they're having. So I think when we think about social justice, we think about resistance, but it's also about the ability to shape and to influence other people's ideas. And it doesn't have to be a very big action, but just in small ways that we can influence others so that the world becomes a better place. And that, I think that's also an effort for social justice.
Thanks, Weijia. We have about 5 more minutes, so if anybody else has any thoughts, questions, ideas.
We have a question from Sahar in the chat. She's asking about how strict are you regarding the submission guidelines? Might you accept a piece that is longer than 3,000 words? Is there a limit of how many authors may be listed for a single submission?
Karen,
I don't know. I don't know how many authors would take up the space. We have a space problem. We try to charge a very minimal subscription price, and that pays exactly the price of printing and mailing issues. So currently we keep it to 3,000 words so that we can squeeze in 3 articles and a tutor's column. And we have to keep to that, because if we add more pages, that kicks up the journal into a different mailing price, which we can't afford. So we're really holding to 3,000 words only because we're trying to keep the costs down. So 10 or 15 words we can squeeze in or something, but we cannot go to much longer because of that problem. And it's really a cost problem.
I'd
As for
add,
authors,
yeah, if you have something that seems to be longer than that, you just might want to break it up into 2 different articles. If it's a rich topic, think about how that could be 2 different articles or split up. But
that's a good thought, Karen. Actually, the Chronicle of Higher Education had a brilliant article on the 2-paper problem. When an article gets so long, you look at it and it's probably got a couple of issues going on. I don't know how relevant it is when you were talking about times of crisis, but one of the special issues coming up in next year, we hope in the journal, is a special issue about what we've learned from the pandemic. Noreen Leip is the guest editor on that. And I am really curious to see what is it that we've learned through all this agony. Any other topic people have on the mind?
I know one of the things that Tom Deans talked about on the blog about the writing centers and the differences. I think that would be such an interesting article to submit to WLN2. How are you, either through training or tutoring, what is different about your writing centers in outside the US that maybe we can learn from? It doesn't mean that our writing centers have the perfect model. I think by hearing about other ways that other centers are supporting writers is often a great way for us to learn.
Thanks, Karen. Paula, did you want to say something? It's nice to see you, by the way.
Nice to see you. We've been communicating via email, and I want to take this opportunity to thank you, Esther, and Mickey Harris for supporting us post August 4 explosion. Your words meant a lot to us. And after this unfortunate, I don't want to call it event, experience, we decided to help the youth who've been trying to write, to express themselves on social media in a project, training them to be able to express whether they were directly or indirectly affected by the blast through trauma writing. So I was wondering, when you mentioned writing in times of crises, whether trauma writing would be of interest to the audience of the blog or to the journal itself. I shared the link of the website that has student submissions and the workshops we've conducted so far. It's a one-year project that was funded by the US Embassy. It's a community project. It's non-academic, and this is what makes it motivating as well, to see how those young people are interested, even though it's not a grade-driven or course-driven assignment or task.
Thank you so much for sharing that link. I wasn't aware of that project, and it's extremely inspiring, and I'm so happy that it's happening. We would love to have a piece on that, actually, on the blog. I posted a link to Todd Hunter at AUB is doing some workshops in the Writing Center specifically, but I think this would be a nice complement piece. It sounds like it's a broader project, and that would be very, I think, interesting, and we would be very open to it.
Can I just say, Paula, it's so good to see you. You persevered, and your courage is amazing.
Yeah.
Still trying to tolerate. It's nonstop. I mean, it's not only the blast, but we're still suffering other challenges, if I may put it this way. And if I can add, this project was equally healing to the organizers and the students. So it was helping us as well.
Yeah.
This is how we find it rewarding.
Yes, the power of writing. Well, we would please be in touch when you have the mental space or the time to let us know. We would be very open and welcoming of that piece. And oh, I think we just lost her. Oh, there you are. Okay. Did you want to say one more thing?
This was our electricity. I lost power now. The generator is on, so another challenge in Beirut.
Yes, so many challenges
that we experience. So with the rise of prices of fuel, we don't have electricity 24 hours like others do.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, we're so glad that you could join us. And we're so glad that we were able to meet everybody here today. We feel inspired and like we're actually living the mission, Mickey, of connecting writing centers across borders. In that regard, yay for Zoom and online, the online digital world, because we can actually make it happen in this way. We would be really happy to, we would love to continue the conversation, to come back at any point. Please do keep in touch, and please do email us or reach out to Mickey, Karen, Ted, and those of us on the blog about any ideas or questions you have about publications. And we hope we can reconnect in the near future. Thank you, all of you on the board, for organizing this and for inviting us.
Well, dear Gabrielle and editorial team, we're very grateful for your time, and information you shared with us will really help us develop and encourage us to write more and not hesitate to share with you our thoughts about the Writing Center and the teaching of writing in the region. Thank you, Anna, Esther, Weijia, Muriel, and Karen. Thank you all for your time and for joining us. It was such a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you. And I should say it's Esther's birthday. So happy birthday, Esther.
That's a surprise. Thank you.
Yay. We hope you have a good day.
Thank you. It was great.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
You too. Bye.